Welcome to Travel with Sean. I'm Sean, and today we're in Copenhagen, the capital city of Denmark. There is a lot to see in this city, so let's get started. Let's take a look around. Now, one of the first stops on our trip here in Copenhagen is Nyhavn. So, Nyhavn was created in the 1600s. What it means is new harbor. Why is this a new harbor? Because back in the 1600s, the king had just created Kongens Nytorv, which is the king's new town, right up over here. And I'll explain Newtown in a little bit. But let's get back to the harbor. So he just created a new town, and he wanted the harbor built. He wanted a harbor built closer to his palace, so that his royal yacht would not be so far away. So that was why this harbor was created. Now, today we call it Nyhavn. Why do we call it Nyhavn? Because that's what he called it back then. They just never changed the name, kept it out of tradition. And likewise, the colorful buildings. Why are they so colorful and so many different colors? Tradition. That's the way it was in the 1600s. They just kept it that way for looks. And this canal takes you out to this harbor takes you out to the canals, which take you out to the sea. That way it was easy for the king to travel to Sweden or wherever. And actually parts of Sweden that are easily reachable by boat from here were part of Denmark back then. But back then, this would have been lined with some businesses, mostly catering to the royal family or royal courtiers. But nowadays, this is more of a tourist attraction. And you find many stores and restaurants along the way here, mostly restaurants, and a lot of boats, some for fishing, some for recreation, some people may live on, and some may actually have restaurants on them. But then also, it's a good stopping place. It is one of the two stopping places, or starting places, for the tour boats, if you want to take the canal tour in Copenhagen. Kongens Nytorv was created to be the city center upon completion of a major expansion of the fortified city of Copenhagen. In the beginning of the 17th century, King Christian IV wanted to double the size of Copenhagen by purchasing over 490 acres of land just outside of the fortified city. Christian IV wanted this to happen. That was his vision, but he died before he could make this a reality. King Christian V pursued his grandfather's dream, and made this come true. And then here we have a statue, probably of King Christian V. But all this was built up in about 1670. In 1670, they tore down anything that was here and then rebuilt this. And the idea was that they would have some royal palaces, they would have businesses and government buildings surrounding this square. This was to be the center of Copenhagen. It was to be the heart of the city. Now it still remains as a public square, but it's more of a social gathering place. This big building is the Christiansborg Palace. It's the main government building for Denmark, and it's a principal seat of power in the country. Also home to Parliament, the Supreme Court, and the Prime Minister's office. But it wasn't always so. In fact, this is the third palace that has been on this spot since 1167. The Danish royal family lived here until 1794, when they had a fire in the palace and they had to move. That is when and why they moved to Amalienborg Palace. And you see the domed building, that's the Stadtkirke, the state church. And it used to be the royal family's personal chapel when they lived here. This is a vestibule of Christiansborg, leading from the royal residence to the chapel. So back in the day, the royal family would walk along here to go to church to avoid the rain or the snow or the wind. And of course, then the royal dining room. One would think this would be big enough for the family, but actually this would be for state dinners. Royal family members and dignitaries from visiting countries, visiting dignitaries. Then we enter King Christian IX's room. And if you look at the carpeting, it's a coat of arms. It was a gift to the Queen on her 40th Jubilee, the 40th anniversary of her reign. It was a gift from Parliament. That brings us to the throne room. Here we have the family tree of the descendants of King Christian IX. He ruled Denmark from 1863 until his death in 1906, and he was known as the father-in-law of Europe because his children all married into the royal families of several European countries, and he is the common ancestor of several European monarchs. His children were Alexandra, Queen Consort of England, Thera, Crown Princess of Hanover, Prince Valdemar, who married Princess Louise of Orleans, Dagmar, Empress of Russia, Prince Frederick became King Frederick VIII of Denmark, and Prince William became King George I of Greece. Queen Alexandra is the common ancestor of King Harold V of Norway and King Charles III of England. Crown Princess Thera was the great-great-grandmother of King Felipe of Spain. Prince Valdemar was the great-great-grandfather of Margareta, custodian of the crown of Romania. Empress Dagmar was the grandmother of Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia. King Frederick VIII is the common ancestor of King Harold V of Norway, Queen Margareta II of Denmark, and King Felipe of Belgium. King George I is the common ancestor of King Charles III of England, Constantine II, former King of Greece, and Pavlos, the Crown Prince of Greece, and Margareta, the custodian of the crown of Romania. And right now I'm actually standing over one of the many canals that go through the city. And these canals are popular for recreation, for travel, for tourism, or just relaxation. Bicycling is one of the major means of transportation in Copenhagen. as you can see, there are many bicycles, many bicycle parking lots. This is the Little Mermaid statue in Copenhagen Harbor. It was unveiled in 1913. The sculptor made it because he was inspired by the story written by Hans Christian Andersen. When he was making this sculpture, he wanted to use the principal dancer of the Little Mermaid ballet in Copenhagen. And she agreed until she found out he wanted a nude model. She refused to pose naked, so he used his wife as a model and then used the dancer for the face. This building in front of us is called the Round Tower. Of course, because it's round. And this tower was actually built in 1601 by King Christian IV. He had it built because he was really inspired by a very famous Danish Danish astronomer named Tycho Brahe. And so after he died, the king had this observatory built in his honor to continue his research in astronomy. So we're up on the Round Tower, which is the tallest observatory in Europe, looking out over Copenhagen. And if you look in the distance, you can see the harbor, the water in the distance, and beyond that, you can see some land. That land is the city of Malmö in Sweden. Now we're looking out to the outer edges of the city, like the neighborhood of Christianshavn, and Islandsbrygge. This view of Copenhagen shows some of the older buildings mixed in with some newer buildings. We're in an older part of town. This is the Copenhagen Rådhus, which is the Copenhagen City Hall. It's one of the tallest buildings in Copenhagen, built from 1892 to 1905. This architectural style was inspired by a city hall in Siena, Italy. In this area around it, it's called the Rådhuspladsen, which is the city hall square. Straight ahead is the shopping street. That's where their higher end shopping stores are, clothing stores, jewelry stores. This is the inside of the City Hall. It's the amount that's open to the public. Church of Our Savior was completed in 1695 and built in the shape of a Greek cross. You can see the front of it here, and when you go around back, then you can see that it is a cross extending on both sides. Although completed in 1695, the spire, the church tower, was not completed until 1752, and that is the most attractive part of the tower, most famous part. This tower goes up, reaches a height of over 295 feet. And if you look closely, you can see a stairway going around and around to the top. That famous stairway is called the Stairway to Heaven. Unlike the Led Zeppelin song, this stairway is not for sale. Unless you're talking about ticket sales. 69 Danish kroner to climb up the top of the tower. It's about $10 per person, per adult. Thanks again for watching. If you like what you saw, give me a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe down below. Then you can be alerted to future episodes of Travel with Sean. Thanks again.